Well, welcome everyone to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast, and we have Joe with us.
So glad to be here.
Joe,
this is fun.
Thank you. And then we have Allison Li, our worship leader at Menlo Park. Thank you so much for being here as well. Yeah. And Joe, for the people that might have missed it, you are our guest speaker for this series that we have right now with the kickoff of Weird Church, which is basically us talking about things that we do as church people or in a church service that might be weird to someone. And yeah, so thank you so much for your time.
I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot to pull from there, right? There are many things we could talk about that seem very weird.
Of course. But we'd love to spend this time a little bit to get you to know you a little bit better. I don't know if you can already tell by Joe's accent, but she's not from the Bay Area.
If you say Australia, you're in trouble. I get that surprisingly often.
Do you really?
I do, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sometimes South African, sometimes Irish.
Oh, but not any of those.
Not any of those.
Good.
Yeah, good old England.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, where'd you grow up? How'd you get here? Family, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Fun. I grew up in London. My dad was a pastor, so I grew up around a lot of weird things in church.
Sure. Then, you haven't escaped it.
Yeah, that's right. I'm still here, somehow still here. Went on to study theology for undergrad, and then just kept going. And so did a PhD in the Old Testament. I was really interested, particularly in the question of how does God see women, and do they have value in his eyes, and particularly, how the Bible talks about that. So that was kind of the area I focused on, and then wound up working for a ministry, basically helping answer people's big questions about Christianity, like all the things that seem weird, that don't make sense, that we're wrestling through. So that brought us over to Atlanta originally. We spent 5 years living in Atlanta.
Who is us?
Us. Oh, yeah. It wasn't the royal we. It was my husband, Vince. And we have, now, at the time we didn't, but now we have two little boys who are Raphael and Jonathan. They're 6 and 4. Great. So we've been out here 3 years in the Bay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. What are some of your favorite things about being in the Bay, and what do you miss from home that you wish were here?
Yeah, good question. I think, I think part of what I like about the Bay is more than anywhere else in the States, it reminded me of Europe.
Okay.
So actually the first time I visited wasn't when we lived here. We were doing like a week of outreach on the campus of UC Berkeley. And I remember turning to Vince halfway through the week and being like, if I could live anywhere in the States, it would be here. Something about the outdoor lifestyle, kind of more environmentally caring, very diverse, and also very secular. And that's familiar to me growing up in London. And all those things. So there's something about the mix here that actually makes me feel really at home. Now, there are some things that don't. I mean, Americans, not so much here, but Americans in general, just a little more direct and straightforward than English people. So that sometimes takes a little getting used to. It's, English people are known for being polite. We're actually not. We're just more passive aggressive. We just hold it in. And then,
Gotcha.
Just warning you now.
Good to know.
You think they're being polite, but the thoughts running through their mind.
No.
Whereas, especially my husband's from New Jersey, so that was hilarious the first time I visited. And I was like, people just say what they think. They let you know how they actually feel about you to your face. Like, this is incredible.
Yes.
But it was refreshing. At least you know where you stand.
I guess so. Yeah. That's one take.
There's another take, but I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Allison.
Yeah.
Same question for you. I mean, you've been on the podcast here and there.
Yeah.
But introduce yourselves to someone that might be listening for the first time. And how did you get to Menlo?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Allison. I am the worship leader at Menlo Park, as Mark said. I've been at Menlo for almost 3 years, coming up in August. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, from the Midwest. My dad is also a pastor, so I've been around a lot of weird church things as well my whole life. And I went to school at a small Christian university called Concordia in Irvine, California. I got to study English literature there. Was going to be a high school English teacher. That did not happen. I also just did a lot of worship and music stuff, got a minor in it as well, and then just kind of graduated and went into worship leading, and have been doing that since. I'm married to Brandon, who's also a worship leader in the area, and we have our first little boy named Teddy. He was born in October, so yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. And I don't know why, but I feel like I should mention I'm also a pastor's kid, kind of.
This is a fun
I
scenario.
know. Yeah.
Turn this into a
Yeah,
real
wow.
therapy
This
right
could
here.
be. Yeah, I was going to say this
around a lot
podcast
of
could take a
things.
sharp turn.
Yeah.
Growing up, my mom was my children's minister at the small little Japanese church that I grew up going to, which is really interesting because she was not Japanese. So like my dad is, but my mom
Okay.
was
We
French
love
and
it.
Irish. And so, I remember going to church during the week and going to her office and playing on the computer there,
Yeah.
and then going to that same place on the weekends for church and like trying to make sense of that in my mind of like, whoa, how are these places different things at the same time? And then eventually, I don't know, graduated from the children's program and she was no longer my pastor. But she's always my pastor kind of because she's my mom. So
Doesn't go away.
shout out to moms.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought it was kind of funny because some of the things that we're working in with our worship is like these throwback songs that we're doing.
Yeah.
And the one that we did for this weekend was actually took me back to the time and place where I was singing that like at my church back when I was visiting or like back in Anaheim. And so
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Which one?
It was the one after your message. So
Oh, yeah.
it was
The Heart of Worship.
Yes, coming
Yep.
back to the Heart of Worship. It was like I remember singing that and then having to stack chairs.
This is the true heart of worship.
Yep,
Stacking
exactly,
chairs. I love
exactly.
it.
Totally is.
So for people who are like, what the heck are you guys talking about? Joe, why don't you recap your message? What were we talking about if someone might have missed it? And then we can jump in.
Awesome. Yeah, so we were just saying to Allison, it was kind of a brutal title for the worship team because we were talking about
Humbled us,
Christian
humbled us, yeah.
karaoke.
Yeah.
It's a phrase we were
Yes.
using for why do we sing in church? And what is that all about? Which
Right.
is funny, right? Because if you grow up in the church, you never think about that. You just
Yeah.
do it. And I mean, I wonder how many people were there who were like, I've never thought about this before. Why do I come to church and sing? But yeah, we were kind of diving into that question, and I kind of broke it down into two parts. So the first half we were talking about the bigger question, the underlying question, well, why do we worship at all? You know,
Yeah.
and how weird that can seem to some people, the kind of like feudalistic, like aren't we past this sort of bow down before a king and, you know, we live our own life, let's be free, all those things. But what I spoke about in that part was that actually it's worshiping is actually very natural to us as human beings. And what's weird is the fact that we sort of try to worship everything other than God. So actually he is,
Wow.
you know, he's the one who is actually, you know, worthy. That's what worship means. Worship, the worship. He's the only one worthy of worship, and yet we put it into everything else. And then I kind of spoke about how, you know, part of the reason for that is because we can have warped understandings of what it means to worship. And for some of us, a lot of fear can be around that. You know, we grew up hearing like the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, or, you know, he's like, and that language of fear can make us feel frightened. You know, how do we approach him? What does it mean to worship? And so what I spoke about was actually how like worship is just our right response to who God is. But when the Bible talks about fear, like the kind of fear we're talking about is actually more about reverence and awe. You know, it says like, with you there is forgiveness, therefore you are feared. It's about really seeing who God is and what he's done for us that invokes our worship. And when we actually have a clear understanding of just how incredible God is and the unbelievable things that he's done for us, then actually it transforms this experience of one of like, I'm so afraid of you, I'm just going to fall flat on my face and play dead and hope you don't see me, to like, God, how can I not? Like, how can I not praise you? How can I not sing to you? It's the overflow of just this gratitude and this just adoration for what he's really like. So if we're struggling with worship, like a great question to ask is just, well, what have I missed or not understood about God that is causing me not to want to worship? Like, what am I not getting about him? Because if I really saw him for who he was, I wouldn't really question it. So that was the first part. And then the second part was like, okay, so, but why singing? Like, you know, because obviously like biblically, we talk about worshiping with the whole of our lives. And when we'd be doing God a disservice if we only worshipped him when we opened our mouth to sing. Yeah. But the flip of that is we can downplay. I'm sure you have experienced this, Allison. You can tell us your stories after. But, you know, sometimes we can really downplay singing. We think, well, it's just not my thing. I don't want to opt into that. I'll worship God in other ways. Why does it have to be through music? I find it awkward, whatever. But so then I gave 3 reasons for, I think there are a lot of reasons, but I gave 3 for why I think it's actually important that we sing to God. And so the first one was just that actually, the least important one in a way, but was that it actually blesses us, like it changes us. If you have a rhythm of singing to the Lord in your life, I think it actually is spiritually forming you. And particularly when you go through super hard times, often it's in those moments that worship songs are poured out of me that have just pointed me back to the truth of who God is. Sometimes without me even knowing, I'll be like focused on the problem so much I won't even be aware I've started singing a worship song until halfway through, and suddenly I'm like, that's just, it's almost like the Holy Spirit's been like, this is what you need. But when we live a life of worship, we give him so many resources to pull from to raise up in us in those moments. The second reason I gave for why we sing was because actually it deeply encourages other people. Ephesians 5:19, right? Like, encourage one another. And sometimes, we can come to church with this attitude where we're kind of like, I'm just not feeling it today, or I don't really want to sing and have people hear me. And we're so in our own heads with how self-conscious we are that what we don't go in thinking is, I'm here to bless other people this morning. I need to sing out because I'm going to encourage my brothers and sisters. And there may be someone here going through a really hard thing and they can't sing this morning. But when they hear these truths declared and they see on my face this love for the Lord, that is going to raise them up into, his presence in a way that maybe they couldn't have got there themselves this morning because they were just struggling. So we come to encourage other people. That's why corporate worship is such a big deal. And then thirdly, and primarily, and without which none of the rest of it makes any sense, worship is for God. And sometimes, ironically, we can forget that, right? We think it's about what we're learning from it or the truths we taught ourselves or whatever. But actually, if we're not worshiping for God, it isn't worship at all, is it? It's for Him. And it kind of blew my mind, even preparing for this sermon, actually, like digging into that text in Ephesians 5. I've never noticed it before, how, when it says sing and make music in your hearts to the Lord. And it suddenly just hit me. That's actually like a way of saying, I want you to sing me love songs. And I just suddenly thought, can you imagine like God standing in front of you and you're like, how do I worship you? I'm just prostrate on my face and you're terrifying and you're overwhelming. And He's just like, you know what would really bless me is actually if you would just sing me a love song. Like if you would just sing to me from your heart. If you like, that is the offering that would please me more than anything. And how different would it be if we walked into church on Sunday morning, not thinking like, what am I going to experience today? Or, dissecting the sermon after we leave, being like, well, I wasn't really feeling it today. I wasn't sure about that song. But what if instead the questions we were kind of asking was, God, like, did I please your heart today? Like, did I delight you? Did I bring you something that made you smile? Like, wouldn't that just be so transformational if we were coming with that attitude whenever we come into church to sing together? For like, God, whatever else is going on, I just want to bless you today. And that was kind of the challenge that we landed on. Like, what do we do with that invitation?
Yeah, that convicted me.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You just go pray about that.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna
stop and
I'm gonna
sing
listen
now?
to that. But you're talking about growing up in church and that. Yes, but thank you.
Yeah.
I just love how holistically you paint the picture of what worship is.
Yeah.
And how uniquely singing is a part of that. And it's not an opt-in if I have a good voice kind of a thing.
Yeah.
What is it about God wanting love songs? What is it about these songs that reflect about His character and His nature that can either have it be a part of our story that we want to share or something that we want to live into as well? Because I feel like there's times in worship where I don't feel like I'm in a place where I want to sing about the goodness of God because I don't feel like He's good. But how can that remind us as people, no, actually God is good?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think and I'm sure it's why you probably spend so much time prayerfully choosing what people are going to worship to, because there's that double element, right? That sometimes you sing out of a place of, I'm just so awed by your goodness. I've got to sing about it. And then other times we're in places, aren't we, where we're like, saying these words about you and calling you good when what just happened in my life feels like the furthest thing from good might just be the hardest thing I've ever had to do, honestly. But there's something to that. I actually think there's something that is almost like a more beautiful act of worship when it's not about, I'm just singing because I feel good or this feels good for me.
Yeah.
But when we say, even though this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, I still call you good and I still believe in your goodness. And I often think of that psalm and it says, I'm confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And sometimes worshiping out of a place of pain feels like that. Like, I am proclaiming this truth of who you are to myself in this moment, that I will still see your goodness. And I trust that, and I'm going to hold to that when it's not in me in that moment. And I love Psalm 103, where David David kind of is like preaching to himself, right? When he says, "Bless the Lord, oh my soul," he's like, and forget not all his benefits.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe part of what's going on in those moments. We're like, hear the truth you need to hear to be reminded why you believe, and then believe it.
Preach to yourself.
Yeah. How do you see that, Allison?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, this topic is just so multifaceted, and you do such a good job of just covering all the ways that worship is so powerful beyond singing, but also the importance of singing and music. And it just makes me think back to preaching to yourself and then preaching to the people around you too. Like I often in my job here, especially at Menlo Park, we do a lot of like memorial services. And there's so many times I've sung at memorial services, and I have to worship for the people in the front row, for the family in the front row, who they're in a moment where they're just like, I can't sing it as well with my soul right now. I picked this song for this program, but I can't sing this, but I can for them. And so that's the beauty of the church, beauty of corporate worship. I can just think of so many examples of that that I've seen play out in worship. It just really comes to life when we talk about things like funerals and memorial services. But yeah, there's something too also about the biology of singing and music. And I was just watching one of your podcasts earlier about like just some of these big questions that people have, and often people can take science to disprove, I think, who God is and his character, but sometimes it serves us in the reverse. And I think when you look at music and singing and the biology and the science and the power it has in our brain and in our, like, if you think about people who struggle with Alzheimer's and dementia, songs and hymns are some of the last things that leave them. They stay with them for so long. People who know how to play music, who know hymns that they've sung since they were a child, it stays with them. So there's something about that too. I think God knows how he designed us, and music is a big part of something that just sticks in our brain. It gets stuck. It's something that, words that we repeat in our head to a melody, words about the truth of who God is. There's something powerful about the biology of how God made us with that. With music. Yeah,
it's funny to me because I think sometimes people get anxious, like they feel like, is it manipulative to have music in church when we know that it has such an emotional impact, and so, but people can run from that. Whereas when I look at that, I just think that is so amazing that God knew that we were going to be people who struggle to connect emotionally, and he wants us to worship him with our whole selves, and not just with our minds but with our hearts. And he created this means by which he could draw some of that out, that when we sing to him, it gives us like a language and a tool by which we can actually express to him the things that we find really hard to say. It just puts us in touch with our emotions. And like I found it so fascinating, like researching for this sermon, and and how music is one of the like only stimuli that activates nearly all of your brain, right? From the memory to the emotion to pleasure to motor,
all of it.
Like all of it just lights up whenever we're singing. But there's something so cool in that I love that. Mark, you were saying how like when you hear like I'm coming back to the heart of worship, it makes you think of those early days in your faith, and also stacking chairs, because as soon as you hear the song, it evoked the memory, right? Like that's what music does. And I love how part of the way God works in that is so special, that when you're in that place of doubt and he calls a song to mind, it's not just a song and the words in your head, but it's the memory of a time in your past, kind of like a memory stone in a way. Music serves as like memory stones, doesn't it, in our journey of, no, I remember a time when I was struggling and the Lord came through and I saw that answered prayer. And so I'm praying this prayer, singing this song that I sang then, in the belief that what he did then, I can see him do again. And so it's so cool. Like it's such a powerful thing, the way he uses it.
Yeah. And I love how you ended with an invitation, basically to say, are you going to join in with all of the rest of creation?
Right. Yes.
And how we as humans are kind of the only being that can choose to say yes or to choose to say no.
Yeah, and I heard that. I got that when I said it in the summer a few months ago from Donna Stewart, who's a worship leader, and she was leading worship at a women's conference I was at, and she said that, and it just hit me, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Yes, we are the only beings that get to opt in or out, that we actually choose. And I think that's why it's so meaningful that God says, if you want to please me, sing to me from your heart, because we actually, that's something we can withhold from him. Like everyone else is, the rocks are crying out, the stars are proclaiming, like whatever, but we actually have something there that we can give to God that actually means something to him. Like we uniquely among all creation have an ability by by whether we choose to worship him or not in those moments, to actually like move his heart, to actually like bless him. And that's so mind blowing to me because, sometimes you can imagine a relationship with a being who's so far beyond you. Well, what do I even have to bring to the table, God? You have everything. You are complete in yourself. You don't need me. You are love within yourself. We'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks. Why me? Like, I feel so small, not in like a self-pitying way, but honestly, like, is there anything that I can even do to make you happy? Because we need that in relationships. Otherwise we feel like, why am I here? You know, and God knows that. He made us for that. He made us to be complete in him. And then he gives us that option and that invitation to say, well, you can. You can be in relationship with me because I've actually given you this incredible power to grieve me, to actually hurt my feelings, or to love me and to bless me. You can make my day. And that, when you step back and think about that is really unbelievable. But it's also very convicting because then you're like, well, what about all the days that I don't choose that? All the days I'm leaning out and saying, actually, no, I'm not going to worship you today. I'm just going to do my own thing. And what that does to his heart, and what that's doing in our relationship. And so, there is an invitation there, and it's a big invitation.
And I love how that invitation isn't dependent on condition. Not when you're feeling happy and feel like singing, but always will you choose to worship. Allison, I'm curious for you, as someone that doesn't want to just be seen as the lead karaoke singer.
The lead karaoke star. I love it.
As a worship pastor, as a worship director, what are you hoping worship does in the hearts of the congregation? How are you hoping that after this weekend, for those that might be coming back for the first time or those that are diving deeper into their faith, what are you hoping that they take away, and what are you hoping will form with this kind of deeper understanding of worship is more than just singing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, this topic is just so important. It's important for the people who are on the outside who are like, what's this karaoke thing? Also for the people on the inside where we kind of get to this place where it becomes rote, and we just do it, and we put our hands in our pockets and we sing the songs and we wait for the sermon, those things too. So it's a good reminder of, just the worthiness of God. And like we were just talking about, this invitation, that is such a powerful concept, that we have this decision, that God has given us this choice to give or to withhold, that adoration, that praise, that love. And so my hope, I guess, this weekend is just for people to have a renewed sense of who God is, to be reminded of that picture of his love for us, to be reminded of the lengths that he would go, that he has gone for us, and to be brought back to that authentic place of just like, oh my goodness, I can't help but open my mouth and sing. I can't help but lift my hands in praise because I know while I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. And that gospel message, it reminds me of that. I think it's a Martin Luther quote, that we need to hear the gospel like every day, every moment. It just reminds us of the power of the gospel, and that it calls us to respond with our lives, with our voices, with our offerings, with our time, with whatever it is that we define as worship. So that's kind of my
I might even go a step further too and say, like, for me, I don't think that, and please, if you think this is like weird, let me know. But I don't always think that like someone singing out is like, it's great, and like that responsiveness is great, but just because you aren't feeling that, but maybe you haven't connected with worship before, and now you're actually thinking about what these words might mean in your life. Like, that to me is also responding to worship. So maybe you're not in a place yet where you can say, yes, my grave is now a garden. But maybe this made you think about God can make things that are dead come alive. And what does that look like in my life right now? Responsiveness can look like, yes, singing out loud too. And we hope that that's where you can get to, because God is deserving of your worship. But also, like, if you need to start at, okay, I'm just not gonna either log on just for the sermon, or I'm not just going to like skip over and just kind of, start paying attention once the sermon starts, but actually engage with what's happening and see that as also a form of worship. Like, I hope that can also be something that is built for people that maybe haven't experienced that before.
Yeah, and I think that's That's such a great point you just made there, because it would be a loss for people to take away. Well, unless my worship looks like this, I'm not really worshiping.
Yeah.
In part because God has formed us also differently, right? You know, even in terms of the love languages that we have, and what's so sweet about that is He relates to us in really different ways, dependent upon like how He has made us, and He knows that about us, and so He doesn't expect it to all look the same. Some of us are introverts, some of us are extroverts, some of us, you know, just. Put it all out there. Others are, you know, deeply private, but it's, you know, it's just as worshipful. And I think about Jesus and, you know, the widow's mite, and when she just gives those 2 little coins, and everyone else would have been like, what's that worth?
That
you know,
sign of worship. Yeah.
But Jesus knows it was all she had. You know, I think about the people who maybe watch church online in your community, and maybe in part because some of them had some experiences where they got really hurt in a church, and actually like walking in a door maybe just feels too hard right now. But they still want to worship the Lord, and so they're still watching online, and that's where they are right now. And you know, part of our journeys and stories with the Lord is that, you know, He's with us every step of the way. He knows where we are. He's incarnational. He meets us there, and He'll bring us the way He needs to on a journey of worship, where He knows when we can't get up off the floor.
Right.
But there'll come a time when, you know, when we can, by His power and His help, but He's like, well, I'll get down there with you. Like, if you can't get up, I'll come down, you know. And so I think just wherever you are, you know, your worship doesn't have to look like the person next to you, but just an encouragement, just whatever your 2 coins are, you know, just bring those to Him this week. Just say this, Lord, I don't have much, but this is what I have, and I want to please you.
Exactly. And I'm so excited for next week. We're talking more about that accessibility for all, which is going to be really cool. So a little sneak peek there. But Joe, thank you so much. It's amazing having you here. And so if people are like, she's awesome, how can I find out more about her, what she does? Where can people find out more or see some of the amazing work that you're doing in your ministries?
Yeah, it's also okay if you just think, oh, that was weird.
Bring back the singers.
Yeah. It's like, what is it? Is it Austin? It's like, keep Austin weird. I'm trying to, or maybe it's around here too. I don't know. Weird can be cool, whatever. But yeah, you can find me at, I help lead a nonprofit called Cardia. So we have a website called cardiaquestions.com. You can find content there. We basically just, me and my husband run it, and we engage with all sorts of big life questions that people are working through. We also have a podcast called Ask Away. Cool. So if I said something that you were just like, that made no sense, or I need more information, you can submit questions to that. In each episode, we engage with somebody's question about it, question to do with Christian faith. So you're very welcome.
Yeah, and if you have those questions and you want us to answer them, you could text our team as well, 650-600-0402. We're always happy to pass on your questions to whoever's here, whether it's Joe or someone else. That's one of the favorite things that we do here, is get to include you in the stuff that we're doing. And so, Joe, thank you. I'm excited for the next couple of weeks.
Me too.
It'll be really fun. Allison, as always, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me.
And for everyone else, have a great week. If you need any prayer encouragement, you can text that same number, 650-600-0402. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
See ya.